considered under that bracket, because, and part, for one reason is because there's no cryptographic nature behind them. So that's another distinction. On top of what my colleagues here have said is, I think, what maybe you're getting more at, and where, you know, I think the regulator is drawing the line at the moment.
Yeah, the intent is generally not to regulate in-game gold.
Yeah, this is more about AML and pulling it back a little bit. When you're on an exchange and you're dealing with privacy coins like Zcash and Monero, and like you're moving huge sums of money and then pulling it out through Bitcoin, is there like, what are the ways that you trace these? Like, how do you go about it? Is there like easy ways, or is it very complicated? Do you have to really dig deep into the user's history?
Are you asking for a friend?
For myself.
From an exchange point, it's funny, our colleagues talk about this all the time, of how much people are moving. Like if you have a huge portfolio and you have a little amount of privacy coins, it may not arise as much suspicion as having just privacy coins, or just bringing in privacy coins and trying to cash out on the exchange, which will trigger probably a little bit more suspicion than others. But we can't trace, there's no companies out there that we know of that can trace certain privacy coins. But it's funny, I'm going to be at a conference next month where I think people are talking about the attempts to try and trace it, but as of right now, there's no tool we can use or anyone's offering where we can actually trace the origins of the funds. But privacy coin is already going to raise suspicion to us if being used in outside of the person's history, along with other factors.
Yeah, there's different degrees of privacy, and there are certain coins, for instance, where there are privacy features if you activate them and you use them. Most of the users don't in those cases. So there is, dependent on the coin, a certain degree of traceability. The other trend that I think is really interesting related to that is that to get out into fiat, so in the anti-money laundering world, that's what we call an on-off ramp. So either I'm putting fiat money in, getting crypto out, or putting crypto in, getting fiat out. For those on-off ramps, you generally have to do some sort of know your customer exercise. You generally have to provide some sort of information. And one of the trends that we're seeing that I find really interesting is people that are providing account information. So legitimately, you know, I'm providing my ID and I'm setting up an account with the exchange, but then Giles's gang is actually using that account, so I'm handing over my user ID and password, and they're using that to do their transactions. And so I'm not actually being defrauded in that instance, but the person that the exchange would have identified as the user is not actually the user. And we're seeing ads in all sorts of forums for, you know, set up accounts on exchanges and get paid, and it's quick and easy, and it's really interesting.
Don't do that. Don't be that stooge.
Yeah, do not be
you smiled. Is that like you ran a case of that before?
No, I think I was just reacting to the idea that that there's a cottage industry of fraud, and you know that it's also silly that it's that blatant.
Are you shocked to hear that there's fraud in crypto?
Well, I mean, I get frustrated with that. I mean, in this room, yeah, no, of course I'm not. But I get frustrated with conversations like that with a bigger group, because a lot of people do think it's all the Silk Road. It's all a vehicle for murder for hire. And it's ludicrous, and it's willful ignorance a lot of times. And it's frustrating, and it's something that I bet everyone on the panel and everyone in the room has had to deal with, particularly with maybe more senior generations.
I mean, even ICOs, all the time. If you have to be on a wait list, people are selling whitelisted accounts, which have been registered all the time. And that's maybe not the priority, because it's not money laundering per se, but it's still tax evasion. Well, it's like, it's a tricky tax area, right?
Well, yeah, and I mean, as an ICO issuer, it's your responsibility to make sure you know who you're selling to. Yeah. And so if you're not doing all of your diligence to make sure that that's not happening on your own, or like in your own offering, then you're going to be responsible for that. Yeah. So it is you know, scary, and something that hopefully the issuers and the ICO, like the service providers who are going to run your ICO for you, have, you know, good mechanisms for dealing with that kind of thing.
I think 0x did that, where they cut down they thought they'd have a certain number of accounts, and then they're like, there's all these accounts were the same, like cut off by a digit, and they like cut it down. So,
Yeah.
But it's tricky for sure.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yes, I have a question about security token. So basically, some people really favor security token is because one of the advantages you can make the token comply in different jurisdictions at the same time, the same token basically. So you can list down Durex in the United States and list down Bitmain in Zurich, and also like say Binance in Malta, with comply with local jurisdictions. But then I'm just wondering about the cost of it, because I have to hire like lawyers in those jurisdictions altogether, right? So I'm just wondering, have you ever kind of been approached, like say Polymath that have a marketplace for lawyers, I think. So like, and the fees, maybe you can, say something about that.
I mean, not only do you need lawyers in the jurisdiction where the exchange is located, but also where all of your customers are.
Yeah.
Because like I think we've said a couple times, where you'll be regulated is not only where you physically are, not only where you're incorporated, but where your customers are. And so if you want to have a truly global token exchange, then you need probably legal counsel in every country in the world. Or you figure out where your users are and you decide where your legal spend is best used. But yeah, it can be very expensive, and I think that's why we haven't seen a truly perfectly regulated security token exchange. I mean, I know that there are some that are doing very well for themselves, but I don't know that any of them are complying with everything that they should in Canada.
Do you think eventually we'll have good, and this is a very theoretical question, but that we'll have good bilateral agreements between countries in terms of here's how you comply, but if what you're doing in Canada complies with Canada, then it's good enough for other partnering jurisdictions?
Not anytime soon in the securities world. We can't get agreement among 13 jurisdictions. Securities is an area of law that's regulated provincially, and there have been efforts to get a national regulator because, I mean, we're in the 21st century, and Canada is a small country in terms of number of people. There's no reason why this shouldn't be, because a company goes out to sell shares, they want to sell to the whole country, and we can't get that done. So I think that that's well off. I think that what is perhaps kind of the next stage in that has to do with security token offerings, but private ones to accredited investors, where the definition of accredited investor is similar enough in some big picture countries like Canada, the US, Europe, where you can have some confidence going out and selling in multiple jurisdictions, but the difference is that you're selling a token rather than a share.
Yeah, I think it's certainly on the AML side, it's tricky because for various reasons. I mean, there's good reasons why there are different standards across different jurisdictions. I mean, not only legal, there are different political interests in the countries that factor into all this. I think it's difficult to see in the near term that there'll be kind of one standard. But what I will say is, there are law enforcement organizations around the globe which are getting better at that and sort of sharing information. And actually, there are bodies like the FATF who are kind of global standard setters who, I think are shortly going to be coming out with something on the virtual currency side. And there are efforts at the moment that are being done to kind of try and harmonize some of that. But as for kind of one global regulatory standard, I think it's a while off.
Do you think the trade, just a real quick one, do you think that the trade war right now is playing a big hand into it? There's a lot of the activities occurring, blockchain innovation activities occurring within China and Japan and South Korea. So, with this whole trade war activity, specifically obviously in the American frame, do you think that's going to play a huge hand into like the lack of coordination, a lack of agreement within the context of setting up some sort of common legislation and policy or whatever?
That's a tough one. I think that the people who are eventually going to be kind of the figureheads for this kind of, and I don't think that our government or the United States government has a strong kind of internal negotiating body to even have that be impacted. So I think that it's industry really that's participating, that's working together rather than governments at this stage. So my guess is no, but you know, I'm pleased, but by all means correct me if you guys have other thoughts.
I think there's sort of other obstacles to that kind of coordination, sort of already with it. Yeah. Just, I mean, for one, just every government regulator right now has, constrained resources, and they've got a lot of priorities and policy making. Like crypto's not the only thing that the Canadian Securities Commission, the SEC, have to worry about. They got a lot of things on their plate. They've got limited resources, so I think that's probably a bigger obstacle than whatever President Trump might be up to this week.
For today.
Today.
I think that eventually we might be headed towards a shift in global reserve currency, and I would be just tickled if it was something that were more cryptographically secure and transparent.
Are you hypothetically suggesting like something as far as a deviation in like Bitcoin being a macro reserve, and there's talk around that occurring?
I don't, I would love for the answer to that to be Bitcoin. I don't think that it will be Bitcoin. I think that it's I just think that it's incredibly difficult for governments to move away from the idea that currency can be something that isn't issued or controlled centrally. So there are absolutely beautiful properties of things that are cryptographically secure, that are decentralized, that are open, that are permissionless, but there are also terrifying properties of that. And I think that if I were a government, on the government agency side, I would be seeing more of the terrifying sides of it, but also wanting to harness some of those more beautiful aspects and being able to use those in a way that's going to benefit the global economy. So we see this incredibly complex work that Europe is doing right now in terms of creating special purpose vehicles to be able to buy oil from Iran despite US sanctions in a way that doesn't touch USD or the US central banking system. We're not talking about buying weapons. We're not talking about terrorism. We're talking about countries meeting their energy demand by legitimately making a purchase from another country. I think that when you start to see the complexity that's happening in things like that, it would be shocking to me if those same governments weren't looking into other solutions. And it would be silly if some of those solutions didn't involve cryptographic elements.
I think she had a question.
Oh, sorry, I actually work for government, economic development, trade.
Hi, Max.
So just to add, you guys had really good points, so just to, yes, we have other priorities, surprisingly. Blockchain is not a top of mind. Honestly, like trade is a huge, big deal right now, and that is one of the top things, and it's been the top thing for God knows how long. But I also want to say that I think Canada particularly, but US too, and now the US is shifting, is we have strong lobby groups. US is stronger, but I mean here we have traditionally the steel sector association. Like you have, so what Canada needs to do is have a strong group that comes in, and because the landscape is like provincially, you have to talk to the provinces, and there's the biggest challenge is, I think, actually education. Blockchain and crypto is not easy. Governments, like last year, blockchain, not crypto. Do you know what I mean? Like there's different concepts, and maybe they look at one over the other, or they look at fintech, but I think the whole ecosystem needs to come together, A, inform, and two, relate back to a government is elected on a certain platform. What do they care about? Ontario, jobs is a huge big deal, right? And so you have to lay it out to them. You guys were elected on this platform, this is important. Here's how, the sector contributes, and really sell that idea. And I mean, and it gets really tricky too, because if you're being, when you're trying to get elected on a platform, for example, innovation, and you don't get elected, if you're associated with innovation because you're blockchain, you fall to the bottom of the ladder because you're like, no, the liberals really liked innovation. We're not the liberals. We're going. So it gets really tricky on these political fronts. And one more thing. So crypto is really ingrained in Japan. It's in legislation. They were the leaders. Korea, there's so many people that own crypto, and I think part of it is too is like at a societal level, you have to be comfortable with digital money. So I think there's so many different things that come into play before, you know, you can say, you know, or even start to, you know, create these legislation, regulations that are enabling, because not only do the regulators need to see it's super important for the whole sort of like Canadian economy, like what does it bring? We're moving towards this knowledge economy, it's high-paying jobs, but there's also, you know, lost my train of thought. But yes, so there's many different factors, but they first need to understand. And I think that's our role from the various different sectors, whether it's the compliance, whether it's the fintech guys that are growing exceptionally fast to become unicorn companies. We all need to come together and inform and show Canada, like, this is a big deal. We're transitioning to a new, you know, monetary society. We're building something from the ground up, and not just the fintech sector, but there's applications to like marijuana, you know, like all these different sectors, logistics, there's benefits, and really showcasing that. Thank you.
Let's throw a fun brain teaser in here. Let's go. Oh, good. I just want to end up on a really fun note. That's fine.
Can we hear the brain teaser?
Usually, like it's like the other way around, right? Like students come, and then you have professionals from the industry or judges give them like a case or a challenge. So this is not going to be like another extensive one. It's just going to be really short. Suppose there's a university group out there
Asking for a friend.
asking for a friend, absolutely, that wants to throw a casino night. How does one proceed and not get in trouble to make it a fun event?
Don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
Don't give out money.
Well, that's the whole fun of it, right?
Can be.
On maybe like cryptos,
Use those privacy
or the
tokens.
regulations on that.
Use balloons.
How would you do it?
Round table meeting, signature poker.
I guess everyone's pleading the fifth today.
I'm actually going to ask at this point for Rodney to stop recording.